Ready to go!
Alrighty, ladies and gents, welcome to yet again another program here on YouTube. We're in isolation, we all know that, and I had a very interesting conversation with Neil Pickup and Raymond Jalapins last night as part of the new program that we're doing with Neil every week. And we came up with a really interesting topic, and I wanted to expand on it more for you guys today here on my channel. And the topic is how we go about programming and auditing our own strengths and weaknesses during this time of isolation. Coronavirus is causing us to be inside a lot. We often can't get to work. We're ultimately having more opportunity to train than we've ever really had before. And with that, we've got an opportunity to really establish some fundamental strength gains for our arm wrestling. And I wanted to share with you how I'm kind of approaching that and show you how I would recommend you do it as well. Anyway guys, let's get into it. Alrighty guys, so we're in coronavirus lockdown. The zombie apocalypse is on. We don't know how long we're gonna be here for. We don't know when the next arm wrestling tournament or event is on. So we have an opportunity to take our training to a level that we've never done it before. Now, you guys know very well that I'm guided by Todd Hutchins as my strength coach. He gives me all of the methods that I use in order to, most of all, keep my elbows strong. Now, what I'm going to talk to you about today is not what Todd tells me. Just keep in mind that when you see me training vectors and talking about vectors today and which vectors you should potentially be considering, just know that in the background to all of that is a lot of volume work to make sure my elbows stay intact. Probably realistically 70 to 80% of my time in the gym is spent doing volume work to rehab the elbow. But that said, guys, we're always going through an evolution when it comes to how we train. We go through an evolution constantly. It's a winding path to the top. There is no clear and obvious one right way to get to the elite level of arm wrestling. And we're always learning at the end of the day. So for me, I have been on that path. I started with table time. I went to just kind of random gym time, a lot of arm wrestling, and we've landed here where we're at now, where I'm guided, and I think I have a pretty good grasp on what's going on. So what I'm going to cover today is assessing a few things. We're going to assess first and foremost our finishing power, and then we're going to assess our ability to access that finishing power. And subsequently, we're going to come up with a plan in order to put in place to really get you to a point where you are balanced as an arm wrestler. Now, of course, being a balanced arm wrestler is only one style of arm wrestler. You can be someone who is all in on one weapon. And that approach has been proven to work. There have been many world champions that have one ace up their sleeve, and it's just so good that no one can stop them. But in the times of coronavirus, we need to think kind of more broadly. We don't necessarily know who we're going to be facing next, so we can't prepare that one specific weapon that we think we need. This approach is going to be a holistic approach to developing a really good all-round arm wrestling strength by the time this coronavirus thing goes by. All right, so let's get into it, and let's start with some finishing power fundamentals. Alrighty guys, the first finishing power fundamental that we're going to be talking about is assessing your back pressure. Now we want to assess our back pressure always from a strict start position. So what we've done is we've set up the low attachment. I've set it up so my soft loop is centered to the table, and okay, we'll always be assessing with our shoulders square. Now once we have set the equipment up to be in this position, it's a really critical thing that we keep our elbow planted for our 1 rep max, and I want you to establish what you can lift with your elbow planted. Now it's okay if your arm opens to lift, okay, it's fine. Whatever your strongest point is. For an arm wrestler, the closer you can be to your fist whilst maintaining strong back pressure, it's gonna be the better. But I would say, honestly, in my gut feel, is no more than 90 degrees in the arm is where you wanna go to when assessing your back pressure. Now, this is, I'm calling it a finishing power move as opposed to an initiation power move. The initiation often for this is the ability to keep the wrist up. We'll talk about that one later on, but right now we're gonna take a nice grip. We don't wanna supinate, we wanna always be in a position that is a strict starting position, fundamental power, back pressure. That's the first one you want to assess. My back pressure, 57.5 kilos is my 1 rep max right now. All right. Alrighty guys, the next fundamental in a finishing power sense that I want you to assess is your side pressure. Now, again, we've used the same attachment point as we did for the back pressure, and that's because it simulates the vector that you're gonna find yourself in if a match is stopped and you're somewhat in a hook and you just need to essentially go sideways. This is a really critical one for the inner elbow. That is normally gonna be the weak link. Now, if you are new to arm wrestling, be careful with this one. Don't push too hard too soon. You can hurt yourself quite significantly. Tendons will pop. Worst case scenario, you're gonna break your own arm if you do this irresponsibly. You do need to develop a sense of where your arm and shoulder and elbow is before you go hard on this one. So be careful, please. But if you're an experienced arm wrestler and you're just wanting to get this strength down, it's something that you're gonna be working on, and it's one of the most important fundamentals in what I consider the complete program. Okay, so the low attachment, the soft lips in the center again. We're not holding the peg, we're holding the side of the table. We're standing side on, we're planting our elbow again, and we're just rocking over, okay? Real raw side pressure, Todd Hutchins style. Mine, 65 kilos is my 1 rep max that I can move on this vector. Okay, so we've got the back pressure, we've got the side pressure, we got one more fundamental, and it comes to finishing power to go. Alrighty guys, the final and third and final finishing power vector that I want you guys to assess, and that I'm currently assessing on myself, is down pressure. So we've got the attachment at the highest possible position now, so the angle of the cable is quite significantly from the high to low position. Okay, we've got the center strap set in between the pegs again, and we're just gonna be trying to get this down. Okay, so using the press, okay, it's a very much tricep and shoulder driven movement. Okay, ensuring you're never leaning on your hand, elbow always starting in that ready go position, how much down pressure, and try to get your fist to touch the table. Ultimately what we're looking for, fist touching the table. For me, my down pressure at the moment, 62.5 kilos. So we got an interesting spectrum of what's going on for my down pressure versus my side pressure and my back pressure. You can see my side pressure is my strongest, my down pressure is my next, and my back pressure is currently my weakest. So straight away guys, that gives me some thoughts. I want to always be balanced. So straight away I know my back pressure needs more work than my side pressure, and my down pressure needs also some work in order to catch up to my side pressure. I really do want to achieve balance across all those three pressures. That way you can ultimately counter anyone that you come up against, because different arm wrestlers are going to need different things, and you need to have finishing pressures in all of those different options. But finishing pressure is not enough guys. We need to talk about the ability to access the finishing pressure as well. So from here, let's talk about how to train for access and access to your finishing power. All right guys, let's do it. Alrighty guys, we are back and we're talking now about the accessing component to this fundamental training. Okay, so what we need to establish is recognize that the hand and wrist is what's going to give you access to that strength that we just worked on in our finishing power. More often than not, an arm wrestler is strongest if they can bend their wrist. You force your opponent down your arm, your lever becomes a bit shorter, and you have a secure amount of bite or purchase on your opponent's hand and wrist and arm, and subsequently you can access fully that power without your hand becoming exposed. There are a few exceptions to the rule, Todd Hutchins, those sorts of guys who, despite losing their hand, can still impart more finishing power than their opponent. And that is an opponent-specific ratio that does become relevant if you're taking on an extremely tall top roller. chances are you're going to have a stronger arm than them because their arm is just so long, but they're going to have greater hand control than you. So your wrist goes, you pull without your hand. But today we are talking about generic approaches to training. So what we want to do is get ourselves a free spinning rolling handle. Now a lot of people are going to say, what about wrist wrenches, all those sorts of things? They're great options as well. A wrist wrench tends to tax your fingers, where a rolling handle tends to tax your wrist. They're both critical. I don't have my wrist wrench here with me now, but if I had a wrist wrench, you could certainly be using that for this exact same theory. So what I want you to learn, guys, is basically what we're going to do. Same thing, we're setting up center position. This time I have the pulley at a mid-level, and the reason I have it as a mid-level is because that just feels the most natural for what your opponent is threatening you with when you are in a ready-go position. So in order to access all those finishing powers that we just previously assessed, and remembering I had what, 65 kilo side, 62 kilo and a 62.5 kilo down, and 57.5 kilo back pressure. Okay, I really need, at a minimum, to be able to handle 57.5 kilos in wrist flexion in order to know that I can securely access my back pressure. In order to know that I can securely access my down pressure, I need 62 kilos here. And if I want side pressure of 65 kilos, I need to know first and foremost that I can get my wrist to here with a 65 kilo threat. So it's very, very tricky. I'll tell you right now, guys, my raw cupping strength, my 1 rep max, fails at 60 kilos. So straight away I know that I am missing out on accessing a lot of my side pressure and a lot of my down pressure because my hand opens up beforehand, and that means that I actually become weaker. So for most arm wrestlers, guys, if your hand is taken, my finishing power, not only can I not access the full capacity of my finishing power, but my finishing power is often reduced. Again, unless you are someone who trains very specifically with finishing power with your hand gone, most of us are going to have experienced the factor that if you lose your hand, your own finishing power becomes reduced. So my finishing power with my hand back wouldn't be 65, wouldn't be 57, and wouldn't be necessarily the 62 and a half. So we don't want to lose our hand and wrist in most circumstances. There are a few exceptions to the rule, but for this generic approach, we want to make sure our hand and wrist can catch up to our finishing pressures. So this coronavirus season, this is how I'm doing it. Rolling handle, center position. I don't really care which way I move. You can do it with more down pressure, you can do it with more dragging pressure, you can do it just purely isolated, nothing but hand and wrist. The point being, get this to the same level that your numbers are on finishing power. Ultimately, guys, I would like to have it to the point where all my numbers are the same. And that's something that I think that would be an amazing thing to achieve. As I did mention, I don't have the wrist wrench, but if I did, I would be doing that the same. I do have a wrist wrench, I just don't have it here with me for this video. But the wrist wrench really attacks your fingers. So same thing, you want to be able to have containment to the same level as your fundamental power. Set the handle up, same position, and just contain. Don't worry about bending your wrist, worry about containment. All right, guys, let's sum it all up. Alrighty, guys, there you have it. That is basically the wrap up on how I structure my training during this coronavirus. I actually think it's a fantastic opportunity to really establish some very consistent fundamental strengths, and you're going to come out of this very well rounded. As we did discuss in the opening, this isn't always the right method. If you have a specific opponent coming up, you may recognize that you need one specific weapon more so than the generic approach. But right now, given that we don't know what tournament's on next, given that most of us don't know who we're going to be facing next, this is a really good opportunity to establish a really well-rounded game in your arm, in your elbow, in your hand and wrist. You can see from me, my numbers there. I'm not yet balanced, and I'm trying to achieve that balance. Hopefully by the time coronavirus blows over, I personally have the goal of having 65 kilos as the number on all of my lifts. Okay, so I don't necessarily need to do any more side pressure work right now. I need a lot more back pressure work. I need a little bit more down pressure work, and I need a fair bit more hand and wrist. I feel like if I'm at 65 on all of them, we're gonna be in a really good position, and people like Rob Vigent are gonna be in trouble. Anyway guys, let me know if you got something out of this video. Let me know how your coronavirus training is going. And look guys, if you don't have a training setup like this, you can grab a table from Combat Arms Sports. That's where I got these ones from. Make sure you put in pound for pound as a code. This apparatus here was built by Krasimir Kostadinov. Contact him. He may have some left, although shipping and postage and everything globally right now is horrendous, but you can always knock up something similar. You can just get yourself a cable pulled down, put it nice and close to the table, and you'll be able to do all of what we talked about today as well. Guys, yeah, hope you enjoyed that one. I gotta do some actual training now, and I gotta get back to these damn push-ups that I'm doing. If you're not following me on Instagram, I'm trying to do push-ups to rehab my shoulders, and it's hurting. It's hurting a lot. There's so much fatigue right now. Anyway guys, take care, and I'll see you again soon.
Yes, that's a man!